The thought made Andrew panic and try to close his mind to the second humiliation of the night. He wanted to go away, to be anywhere, then have his dirty diapers changed by the vision of teenaged loveliness who treaded the stairs with him cuddled securely in her arms. As Andrew's mind shut down, the mind of the infant Jimmy took over again, and Andrew found himself instantly confined to the dark quarters of his former fortress once more. The transition from owner to tenant took place without sound or warning. 1 minute Andrew was in charge, and in the next instant the infant mind of Jimmy was causing his hands to clutch at Amber's blouse reflexively. Amber baby Jimmy was perfectly happy to be in the arms of his babysitter. His soggy and filthy diapers were still warm and didn't bother him in the least. He only wanted to be close to the babysitter he had come to adore. Amber comforted him by patting the heavy bottom of his well-filled diaper with the palm of her free hand as she made her way up the stairs. The other hand held him just under his buttocks where his diaper ended. While his baby side was assuaged by her efforts, the adult side of his personality wanted to crawl into a hole and pull it in after him. With every pat, Andrew could feel the rapidly cooling mound of the enormous dump he had taken in his diaper and wanted to cry in shame and humiliation. Jimmy, on the other hand, thought that the sensation of the warm stools and wet padding of the diaper being pushed against his bottom was fabulous. He chuckled and grinned every step of the way until they reached the nursery. The mess Jimmy had made in his diaper was a vindication of his existence, a proof that he could change the world and produce something on his own. Jimmy was inordinately pleased with the mess he had made in his diaper and cooed loudly in pleasure at his accomplishment. Besides, the mess he had made his diaper feel so warm and comfy. The wet feeling of the urine-soaked diaper clung to his crotch, moistly making him feel warm and protected. The pores of his skin opened under the influence of the wet diaper, while the moist heat liquefied the oils in his sebaceous glands, allowing them to drain and cleanse themselves in the presence of the sterile urine. It was like having his bottom surrounded by a steam-heated bath towel in an old-fashioned barbershop that still practiced the time-honored techniques of an old-fashioned shave with a heated towel to soften the beard and used a well-stropped razor to make a man's face as soft and whisker-free as a baby's bottom. Unlike the eerie feeling of being surrounded by water that most primates feared when they had aged past the earliest stages of infancy, this was a delightful feeling of having his private parts being securely cocooned in his own warmth. The unexpected hardness of the cooling stools in the back of his diaper as Amber patted his bottom made a nice counterpoint to the wonderful sensations that his wet diaper had produced. All in all, Jimmy was completely satisfied with the changes he had made to his environment and was satisfied. When they arrived in the nursery, Amber laid Jimmy down on the changing table and buckled the safety strap around his belly before getting a fresh diaper ready. She had had experience with babies that were wriggly happy to wear wet, dirty diapers and knew what to expect the moment she exposed his warm pubes to the relatively cold air of the nursery. She took a pacifier out of the jar at the back of the dresser and popped it between his lips before reaching over to the shelf, pulling a clean diaper out of the proper package and unfolding it to have it ready when it was needed. Amber opened the tub of baby wipes and picked one up, leaving it draped over the side of the tub as she proceeded to take the top off of the jar of nursery Vaseline. She knew that once she had his diaper down, little Jimmy would begin to either fidget horribly or howl in anger. Amber's experience told her that once she got him into a clean diaper, he'd calm down, but she would have to move quickly to minimize his discomfort at being changed out of what was to little Jimmy a very pleasing situation. When all was ready, Amber quickly unstrapped him, unfastened the tapes on the side of the disposable diaper and pulled it down between his legs. As expected, the shock of the cool air on his wet skin chilled Jimmy and annoyed him grievously. He opened his mouth to howl his anger, but the pacifier muted his complaint. Within minutes, Amber had wiped his little bottom clean with the front of the diaper, scrubbed his pubes and behind with the baby wipe she readied, and had lifted his behind to slide a clean diaper beneath it. Both Andrew and Jimmy were extremely upset with the diaper change. Andrew was mortified to have a woman who he admired clean his dirty bottom like a helpless infant, which he found excruciatingly humiliating, because that was exactly what he had become, and little Jimmy, who was upset that the comfortable environment that he had created for himself had been removed without warning or permission. Within a few scant minutes, Amber had his bottom protected with a coating of Vaseline, had dusted his crotch with a light coating of baby powder and had safety re-diapered him in an overnight diaper. Jimmy calmed down immediately once his bottom was ensconced in the downy soft padding of his fresh overnight diaper, and he began sucking on the pacifier immediately. Andrew was less mollified. The experience had severely affected his self-image as a man and had made him realize that he was completely at the mercy of the women who ruled his life. The girl who he would have wanted to court only a week before was now the caretaker of his helpless infant body. He felt like he had been damned and sent to an infantine hell. Since the hour was late for such a little one, Amber decided to find a sleeper for him while she babysat him downstairs. He didn't appear to be sleepy, although he seemed to have gotten over the diaper change just as soon as he felt the comforting softness of the fresh diaper between his legs. He was happily sucking on his pacifier with a joyous expression on his face as she fastened the safety strap again so she could go through the drawers to find some nightwear to fit him. In a few minutes she found a baby blue sleeper with an applique of Winnie the Pooh on the front that was just the right size. She unstrapped Jimmy and sat him up on the changing station, then gathered up the already opened bottom in her hands to pull it over his head. Once she had worked his arms through the sleeves, she laid him back again and tugged the garment over his diapered bottom and laid the limp folds of the open legs loosely over each of his lower limbs. Beginning at his feet, she fastened each of the snaps in turn, going from one leg to the other to ensure that the fabric of the sleeper was evenly distributed. The loud pop of each snap fitting home made Jimmy chuckle in delight at the same time that it drove Andrew into a fit of morose depression. Each one of his personalities interpreted the sound of the snaps in a different way. For little Jimmy, it told him he would be once again warm and secure, and for Andrew they were the final signifying sounds of an adult life lost and his permanent transition into a state of loving confinement and helplessness. After a few minutes, however, Jimmy began to frown with uncertainty with his new clothes. Although Jimmy had loved the feeling of being snapped into his sleeper initially, the strangeness of having his entire body covered soon began to disquiet him. Since he had been under the care of Kaostoin, the only thing he had worn had been a disposable diaper. Worry lines appeared at the corners of his eyes and his mouth frowned in disquiet. Once she had finished dressing Jimmy, she took him in her arms and carried him over to the rocking chair. The poor little thing's face was furrowed with anxiety lines that would have been more appropriate to an adult male's visage. She felt sorry for Jimmy and held him close to her breasts for a few minutes while she rocked him. After a few minutes, she decided he needed more than simple cuddling to calm down, and she opened her blouse to expose her right breast. At first, Jimmy would have none of her tit as she exposed it to his mouth. He turned his head away from the foreign object in rejection of the unknown. But after stroking the side of his cheek with the tip of her nipple, she awakened his infantile reflexes, causing his face to turn involuntarily to the teat and take the nipple into his mouth without thought. Jimmy settled down into a session of dry suckling which he found comforting and quickly induced the light sleep of a comfortable but not exhausted infant.